So happy to be here with you all. My name is Gilbert Michaud. I'm an assistant professor of environmental policy at Loyola University in Chicago at the Sustainability School, where I teach energy and environmental law and policy classes. And I'll be the moderator for today. I'll keep things pretty quick up here. If you're following along in the online program like I am, one quick update to the schedule is Kevin Doran from RACI won't be here, so we have two speakers instead today. We'll let them go for maybe 15 minutes each or so, and then write down your questions. We'll save everything for the end and have a nice, fun Q&A and discussion if that sounds good to y'all. But first up, we'll have Cynthia Finley from IREC, the Interstate Renewable Energy Council, VP of Workforce and Strategic Innovation, to talk about some of their programs. And then after Cynthia, we're going to turn it over to Micah Gold-Markle, the founder of Solar States. He's in Philadelphia, and we'll talk about some of his work as well.
Thanks for being here. Cynthia Finley, Vice President at IREC. How many of you have heard of IREC? This table doesn't count because they're all from IREC. All right, so some of you know. Interstate Renewable Energy Council has been around for, I think, we debated the other day, 42 and a half years was the number. It's been around a long time. We are working to build the foundation for the rapid adoption of clean energy, and we've got three really distinct programs that do that. We have regulatory engagement. And we've got some folks here from regulatory who have a poster, so you should check it out. It's over there. They talk about a bunch of things that are way out of my league, but we really want to modernize the grid and improve interconnection and all the things that you all know a ton about, but IREC really started in that space. We also have local initiatives which helps communities adopt and transition to clean energy, and we have workforce development, and that's where I reside. And we've got a lot of great programs to help advance and create pathways for folks into clean energy. We're really excited about the work we're doing in spite of all of the changes that are happening. How many of you read the newspaper today? All right, so a few. How many of you are familiar with the Solar for All program? So today it came out that they are again putting it on the table to recall that $7 billion for Solar for All, which is going to have a huge impact because all of those grants had a workforce development component. So it was gigantic. It was one of the biggest influxes of funding for workforce for us to really expand into solar and community solar and expand jobs and create a lot of careers, particularly for folks who come from underserved communities. So we'll talk a little bit about what that means today if it comes off the table and get your thoughts on it as well. But historically, IREC's been around a long time, and so we've seen a lot of these waves come and go, and I think we're grounded in two things, working in the facts and the data that we have in front of us, and making sure that we're providing quality in the sector. And that's one of the biggest things that we want to make sure we create is sustainability in the workforce. We don't want folks coming in and then leaving 6 months later. We don't want to damage the reputation of solar. I'm in Virginia, and in a rural part of Virginia, they have yard signs up that solar panels leak battery fluid into the ground. Like they're all on, in a rural road, and everybody's got acres of property. And I asked some friends of mine, is that true? They were like, no, it's not true, but that's what some communities think. And so we're already battling the impression of clean energy back and forth in some cases. So we want to make sure that we're building quality, sustainable programs for the next generation of workers. And we do that by making sure that the programs we create are equitable. So starting with some facts, IREC puts out the solar census every year. I'm going to give you a couple of facts from last year's solar census. I would anticipate that those numbers are going to stay the same this year, but that also is irrelevant because we're now in a new era. So what's going to happen to those numbers and those workers? But last year, 26% of the workers in solar or renewable energy were women, compared to 47% of women who were in the workforce nationwide. So we need to get more women in the workforce, for sure. Black and African American and minorities made up only 9% of renewable energy, compared to 13% of the workforce nationwide. We have a lot of work to do there. We want to serve these communities and create equitable opportunities. We're going to need more diverse faces. So we've got some work to do there. 82% were younger than 55, which I loved to hear. But I came to the session last night, and there were folks in the room who have eons of institutional knowledge, but we are all also 5 years away or more from retiring. What are we going to do with all that knowledge? We've got to get some younger folks interested in this field. 77% of workers were younger than 55 in the overall U.S. economy in 2023. And 31% of folks in the clean energy sector identified as Hispanic or Latino. And I had a fun fact from one of the persons who works for us at IREC who does identify. She's from Columbia. And she told me that number's probably higher, but they don't always identify or check the box in the data. So we don't really know how many folks identify as Hispanic or Latino. So we've got some work to do to diversify our workforce programs, and we've taken it upon ourselves over the past 2 to 3 years to really put the work in. The IREC Workforce Division started in quality. So we saw that there was education and training, but it wasn't really matching what the industry needed. So employers needed people, quality people, and they just weren't getting it out of their training programs or community colleges. And we wanted to make sure that there was some standardization in the industry. And IREC holds the accreditation for training providers in weatherization and for solar. And for trainers, we've got one over here. I'm super excited. And we make sure that those trainers are providing quality training. And that is key so that employers get people from day one who were trained right, who know what they're doing, and they're more likely to stay in the industry. We've expanded on that, and we've created a network for job seekers and career maps. And we created career maps. I'm sure some of you have seen them if you've seen IREC. We've got career maps that are lovely. You'll click on them, and it'll show you where you can go and what jobs you can have, and that was phenomenal. And we created a lot of technical assistance and training for employers, which was also great. But we needed to do a little bit more, right? We did some in these places, but we were still disconnected. And when I started at IREC, I looked up a state, and I looked for solar installer training at a community college. And I came from a community college, so I thought, I'm going to find it. It took me forever. I could not find the curriculum. It was buried under some other program that I never would have thought to look at, and that was solar installer. I would have never thought to look there. So a lot of folks might put it under construction craft laborer. If I'm looking to work in solar, I'm not going to look up construction. So we had some disconnects, and we wanted to change that. So we took that data, and we took what we knew about needing to diversify and also wanting to have quality, and we created Green Workforce Connect. It's been around 2 years now, maybe 18 months, something like that. And we did that through intentional partnerships. We wanted to raise awareness. We knew that. We had great career maps, but who knew about them? Did job seekers know about them? Were students using them? We have all this great information. We wanted to get it out there to students. So we created focus groups to find out what was missing in these communities. What did they need? What kind of communication worked for your students and your job seekers? We found out nuanced things, just like I want to be called a energy professional, not an employee or a worker or a contractor. Just the way we approached our language and the stories that we were telling. And we knew we needed to do some work there. We worked with community college and community-based organizations and employers to make sure that we could make these seamless connections for a job seeker or a student to come to our website and explore what these jobs were. And not just the career pathway, but what are these jobs? My research, my academic research, showed me that in 6 months of anybody in industry from a low socioeconomic community getting a job, they leave within 6 months. And the biggest reason they leave is because they didn't really know what the job entailed. They didn't really know what they'd be doing. And I always give this example. I wouldn't have known if you told me you could become an energy auditor. I might jump at that. But if you told me that I would be under someone's house with the spiders and the snakes, absolutely not. And a lot of these students didn't know. I came from infrastructure before I got into energy, and I use this example all the time. I'm in Virginia. It gets hot. And thanks, Colorado, for making it 96 degrees when I came to visit. But we pour asphalt. And we had students who say, well, I knew I could get a job, heavy equipment, pouring asphalt, but no one told me it'd be 105 degrees on the highway in Virginia. They didn't like that. And so we wanted to make sure that folks really knew what they were getting into and that we were meeting the needs that employers had. What were they missing? What kind of soft skills were they missing? what does a career pathway really look like? And so we put on videos from folks who have these jobs, and you can see their trajectory and where they started and how they got through that career map. So we put real people on the site and then match them with all of the resources and technical assistance that we have. And we loaded on all of our IREC accredited training facilities, and we're working to put on more training facilities that are vetted and quality so that those job seekers and students can just click a button and go straight to those training providers in those states. And they can connect to employers in their states. But unlike much of what I buy off Amazon, it is not one size fits all, right? What happens in Virginia is not what happens in Colorado. It's not what it looks like in Wyoming. The communities are different and the jobs are different. And so we have state pages for each one of the states so that if you're in Wyoming, you're going to see what's happening in your state, and you're going to get resources that are in your state so that you can actually do something with that. That's one way. But we know that this is a one-way journey. Once you get the job, then what do you do? How do you get through that career pathway that we showed you at the beginning once you have your job? How do you make that happen? As an employer, how do you keep those people? So we wanted to create resources and technical assistance for employers to help them set up apprenticeships, to help them diversify and work with their workforce and retain their workforce, to help them get their workforce through the career pathway so that they can grow their business and remain strong. So we want to have that pathway coming back the other way. So we provide all those resources for employers, and the hope is that that job seeker or student gets all the way to the end and then bounces back and forth between employment and training forever. And I went to a conference a few years ago, and some woman told me this horrid statistic that none of us will ever retire. I was like, thanks, that's enlightening. She was like, the way the workforce is going, we're all going to have to work till we're 80. And I'm like, oh my God. Fun fact, I was like, I didn't leave feeling very empowered after that one, but that it does bring up a good point that we're all going to have to keep continuing. We're going to have to keep changing. $7 billion might be coming off the table. We're going to have to pivot because we want this industry to remain intact and thrive. So how do we do that? Those are just some of the ways that we structure Green Workforce Connect. Now the real work happens. Now we've got the infrastructure, we've got the website and the platform. Now we need to get everybody there, and we need to work together to really expand what we're doing and be innovative about it. So we're holding on to the data. We're making sure that our programs are equitable, and we're going to focus on diversifying the workforce, and we're going to provide outreach that resonates with the communities that we're serving. We're hopefully going to energize younger folks. There's great programs over in the corner. I've got folks from Kidwind here and great school programs, but we really need to energize a younger audience to get into this field, and we need to make sure that we're creating sustainable pathways for folks so that we can keep all the work that we've done over the past 40 plus years going. Some of the examples of our programs, we focused on apprenticeship last year. We did a big push. It was about a 2-year project with the Department of Labor. No one is shocked. They pulled our funding this past year. But in that time, in a 2-year period, we got over 1,100 people registered for apprentices, and mostly in solar and a few other places. And this team over here did most of the work, but I'm also proud to say that almost 80% of those came from underrepresented communities. And so we did that without even saying that acronym we're not allowed to say. We did it anyway. And so it's going to be important that we capitalize on that. So we know it works. We know that bringing all these people together works. We know that leveraging those funds work. We'll talk a little bit today about what are the things that we do. What do we do if there's $7 billion being yanked from our country? How do we continue this work? And so we can talk about that today. But what we plan to do at IREC is to remain rooted in quality, to remain rooted in that data, and to really create creative and innovative solutions so that we can have a sustainable workforce for time to come. So I'm going to pass it over to our quality expert here who actually does all the hard work.
Thank you.
Thanks, Cynthia.
Yeah, thank you, Cynthia. And thank you to ASES and to IREC and all the wonderful organizations at this conference. It's been so great learning about all of the efforts. My name is Micah Gold Markel, and I'm the founder of Solar States. Founded Solar States day one with a mission to do solar installation and education. And our mission statement is to be the on-ramp to the green collar economy for inner city Philadelphians, of which I consider myself one. I went and saw in 2008 Van Jones give a speech about a wonderful book he was about to come out with called The Green Collar Economy, and it really changed my life. He talked about the importance of weatherization, of retrofitting all of these homes for new energy, for green energy. And it just hit me. And I got a chance to talk with Van actually after that speech. And we're sitting there and we're talking, and I say, man, Van, that was really inspiring. He goes, thanks. He goes, do you consider yourself an environmentalist? And I said, yeah, I do. I thought I was all proud of myself there. And he goes, well, where are you from? I said, I'm from West Philly. And he goes, yeah, I know Philadelphia pretty well. That's a black neighborhood, right? I go, yeah. He goes, would you consider a lot of your neighbors environmentalists? And I said, well, I don't know. And he goes, that's your failing. And at that moment, I was hurt, first off. I was like, wait a second, Van, you can't come to Philadelphia and tell me I'm a failure right out of the gate. That's rough. But then I had to think about it. And he was right, We had been messaging environmentalism as save the polar bears, as the ice caps are melting, and everything that was an environmentalist solution had been more costly. For example, eating organic food costs more money. At that time, the fancy car was a Prius. Hard to believe and say now, but that cost more money. So everything was out of the sort of reach of folks who we really needed to be in this movement, who we needed to have as a part of this. Environmentalism still isn't going to survive if it's just accessible to wealthy white men. And so we needed to have better messaging. He said it's really about the dignity of work. It's about being able to pay for childcare tomorrow, to get the house you want, or to get your first house, or the apartment you want, to solve tomorrow's problems, because these are good paying jobs. And we've got to let everyone know that environmentalism is about work. And that's where I think IREC and Solar States, that's where we really intertwine, is this dignity of work idea, that we're training not just quality, but also to include everyone into the industry. And so at that moment, I knew, being from West Philly, I knew all these folks who, for lack of a better way of describing it, did side hustles. So they could fix your kitchen, or install a window at your house, or drywall, or whatever it was, but they were constantly going from hustle to hustle rather than being in a trade or in the union where they had paid vacation, and if something happened to them, workers' comp, and a retirement plan. And so they were constantly living paycheck to paycheck. And that's the role that I wanted to see Solar States play, was consistent, fair employment in the solar industry for everyone. And so how do you go about doing this? Well, at first, being the caught up with myself individual that I was like, I'm going to change the world. That's it. I'm going to do this myself. Like, I'm going to go out there and we're going to train people and all this. And I had a friend who taught in the Philadelphia public school system, and somehow I convinced him to let me do a solar elective. And I knew nothing. I graduated from high school barely, and that was the end of my education. And it was close. And I stood up in front of the classroom, started saying, the sun hits these panels and it turns into electricity. Well, how? They kept asking how and how and how, and I didn't have the answers. And it really taught me how much I needed to learn in order to be able to talk about this stuff with people. And at the same time, I was trying to figure out the business of it all, and realizing I wasn't really reaching the people. Even though I was working in the Philadelphia public schools, the school I was at was for kids who were most likely going to go to college, and that was not the population that I realized I wanted to work with. I wanted to work with people like me who were going to come out of high school and be like, all right, what now? Because I'm not going to college. And not that there's a problem with colleges or community colleges. We actually do a number of training programs with those folks as well. But there's this real gap between, okay, I'm done high school and, hey, I'm not going to college, and what can I do to sustain potentially a family? Believe it or not, in Philadelphia, right after high schools, we meet people who are brand new mothers and fathers right out of the gate who need work right away. Partnered with a wonderful organization called Youth Build Charter School. And Youth Build teaches students, folks who have dropped out of high school, how to come back. They get their GED and they learn a trade. I had been sort of volunteering with a solar company, so I'd been learning a bit of the ins and outs of the solar trade and was ready to work with these students. Had a fabulous time the first year, just volunteered, taught for an hour and a half a day, every single day in the mornings, and then I'd go out and do solar installations in the afternoon. And after I was done a year in the class, I selected 2 students, and we really started doing our own solar installations. And then I was really in trouble because I realized how much support and really a framework that I needed around these students in order to ensure success. And it's a tough story, actually, because Kevin and Maurice were 2 of the first students who worked with me. I ran in, actually, to Maurice, had some problems, lasted about 2 years, and then more or less sort of disappeared, just didn't show up to work one day, and I was never able to really find him. And I went to an event at the Art Museum last year around sustainability, and I didn't have a ticket. I was just hoping to sort of poach my way in. And there was a woman there who saw me. I always wear my Solar States hat. And she said, we never met in person, but do you recognize my voice? I said, no. She said, I'm Tony, Maurice's grandmother. You called me several times when he didn't show up for work, and I found him and got him to come in. I said, okay, great. That's right. Tony, how have you been? And she goes, well, I've been better. And I said, why? And she said, well, Maurice got locked up for life. He got himself involved in a situation that he shouldn't have been a part of, but she said something very meaningful to me. She said, yours was one of the only work opportunities where when he left and he didn't show back, he actually told me he felt bad about it. I was like, oh, wow, that's kind of heartbreaking, really heartbreaking. And she said, I wanted you to know, though, that you made a difference. This one didn't work out, but you made a difference in his life. And I said, my goodness. And I think that was a valuable lesson of some stuff I'd been learning all along, which is if you're not willing to fail more than you succeed in workforce development, then you're not ready for this. I would say, and what does success mean, by the way? I mean, I get asked from social impact investors, folks all the time, do you have some statistics on your success? And I could roll out, I could say, we have 85% job placement, but for me, that's not success. What is success is for people like Thomas Glenn, who came from Kensington in Philadelphia. It's a really tough neighborhood, just flooded with fentanyl and problems. Thomas had never heard of solar before. And in 4 years, he got his own electrical license with Solar States. Yeah, give it up for Thomas. Thomas is actually out here living in Boulder working at Namaste Solar now. His dream was to leave Philadelphia, and he accomplished that dream, which is pretty amazing. And that, to me, is success. But, that took, for Thomas, 4 years. We have another person who came to us through a program called PowerCore PHL. And by the way, if you're thinking about doing workforce training in low-income communities, form partnerships with the established nonprofits. They're there. There are so many people doing great work, and you don't have to reinvent the wheel. In fact, you shouldn't. These folks have deep links to the community. And I'll give you an example. In Philadelphia, there's one called OIC. It was founded by the Reverend Leon Sullivan. An amazing person, did a project where he raised, I think it was $5 million to do the first black-owned mall in Philadelphia, and I think in the entire East Coast. Did this in the 1960s. How did they raise the $5 million? All through $5 and $10 donations at churches, local churches in the Philadelphia area. So this organization, OIC, has deep roots in job training in Philadelphia. And so I came to them saying, listen, I have this idea of doing green job training. And they came to me and said, we've got people who are interested. And that made it so much easier to find the folks and to get people who were ready to get into the workforce. And that's another key. Is I thought I was just going to be like grabbing people out of Youth Build. Well, it turns out as much as Youth Build does great work and the students there are great, there aren't many folks 18 to 20 years old who are ready to wake up at 6:30 a.m. in the morning. As you were saying, what is really the job, right? It's not just putting solar panels on the roof and you can let them know, hey, it's hot, it's cold, it's all that stuff on the roof. But it's also 6:30 a.m. at the shop every 5 days a week. And that's how we do it. And if you had told me that at 18, I'd have said, no way. You know, even probably up to 25, I still have to have my head examined. My kids think I'm crazy for, starting work that early sometimes. But that's the job. And so you have to let people know that, but you also have to have people who are ready for that sort of commitment. And so the flip side of that readiness is folks who have tried a few things, who have sort of done the barista or the fast food job, or bounced around a little bit, and who then understand how much it really stinks to work for minimum wage selling burgers or whatever it is, death to your community, that, okay, now I'm ready to do something more meaningful in my life. And that's the moment where you can have somebody who really wants to engage. And so with Cottrell Holmes, he had been incarcerated, but he had that moment while he was incarcerated and came out, started at a program called PowerCore PHL. They're really innovative, another Philadelphia nonprofit that does work working with folks who were previously incarcerated, training them on green stormwater. And so we formed another partnership with them as well. And they allowed us to train their folks who had green stormwater experience. And then we brought them on. And we really saw between OIC and PowerCore that we had much more success than what we were having when we were taking students right out of high school with Youth Build. So Trell was just a couple years in with us, and I was doing his sort of assessment. How's he doing? How's he feeling? I sit down, I say to Trell, so how do you like the job? And he looks back at me, he goes, what do you mean? And Trell likes to joke around, so I'm like, all right, Trell, that was funny. What do you mean? I said, how do you like the job? He says it again back to me. What do you mean, the job? And I go, all right, Trell, I got to, talk to 5 other people. How do you like your job? He says to me, this isn't a job. I said, what do you mean? He said, this is my career. And he said that to me, and I didn't even realize that was the goal. And that is the goal. Is not, hey, we're going to put you in a job for 6 months. It's how do you spend, and Trell has been with us now for 11 years, leads our commercial teams. He's the leader of a team. And I tell people this all the time. Is your measure of success that 85%, or is it the 10% who stay with you for that long? Because to me, it's the 10%. That's the real difference, is how do you get people to stay? And by the way, it's not just stay at Solar States. As much as I wanted Thomas to stay at Solar States after he got his electrical license, is its success when they go to another solar company and they get a great job there. And we've had a number of people make those steps. They've gone to other solar installation companies, sometimes that pay more than we can at that point in time, and they're doing better. Another major piece of what we want to see is home ownership from our employees. Did you buy a house while you were working at Solar States? That's a big metric that we use, and we have not been very successful with it. But we had our first couple of people succeed in that metric about a year ago. Cleo Anukam, who came through PowerCore as well, bought his first house in the city of Philadelphia. So those are the things that are harder to measure, that are, okay, you know, that result in metrics that aren't that pleasing to look at, perhaps, you know, only 5-10% success rates. But then we're figuring out how to get those better, how to get that better. And one of the ways that we're doing that, and we had seen this thing where 6 months in, just like you said, people are struggling. They're, hey, I was doing this, you know, you told me it was going to be hot, you told me it was going to be cold, you told me it was going to be this, but I'm having this problem at home. My mother lost her job and she takes care of my grandmother, and now they need me to do this. Or my car broke down and I can no longer get to work. Or any number of the just huge amount of problems as a result of living in poverty. So a couple of things that we do. First off, and I learned this very early on, communication is key. We tell people, listen, if you're going to be late, don't be late. But if you're going to be late, you got to communicate it. Otherwise, it's a big problem for everyone. And then people were getting their phones turned off. And you can't blame somebody for not communicating when they don't have a phone to communicate with. So one of the programs that we instituted early on, it's not that much money to provide folks who come from low-income backgrounds with phones so they can communicate easily with you. It's really, it's amazing how inexpensive it is and effective it is at taking away a lot of the problems that people have. The second thing is transportation. And this is a harder one because cars are expensive, but we do have vehicles that people, and we have a vehicle registration schedule that people can sign up for. It's very popular, so people can't always get the vehicle when they need it to get into work. Once they get into work, you can hop into company vehicles, that sort of stuff. But living in an urban environment, we've actually found that electric bikes are a great way of helping people to get to where we are. And also our location in the city of Philadelphia. We are accessible by public transportation, and that's really, really important. Although in the city of Philadelphia, we're seeing public transportation funding being yanked out left and right. And so the quality of service and also the timing of service has been really, really, really difficult to deal with. But the last thing, and then I'll open this up for questions, and this is something we just instituted, but I'm excited to see where it goes, is mentorship. That when you bring somebody on, and this is sometimes their first job, I'll say their first job maybe of consequence. They didn't care about any of the other jobs they were at, and so you know, they were just sort of mailing it in, but now they care and they need to talk to somebody about their problems. We found that, you know, the people who are on the roof working, they don't always have the time to give somebody the adequate amount of time to say, what's going on in your life? You know, how can we make sure you're here on time? How are you feeling? How are you doing? You know, we're all trying to get solar installs done. And so we're now having mentors go out in the field with our interns and with our new employees, and they're checking in every week, and they're staying on the job with them and helping them on the job as well. And these mentors typically are the folks who taught them in their program. And that's this virtuous cycle that we're in now, is a lot of our teachers from our program who I've trained originally went out, worked for 4 or 5 years in the field, 6 or 7 years, whatever it is. Now they're ready to do something different, and they are becoming our trainers, and they can tell people more realistically what it's like out in the field, but also be there through the whole process of saying, okay, you're coming through our program, you have the internship offer, you have the job offer, and I'm going to be with you the entire time through your entire first year working at Solar States. And so we're really excited with the early results there. We're finding that we're seeing much less drop off between hiring and internship and hiring and then staying with the company past a year. So that's what we're doing at Solar States. And again, thank you to all of the great partners like IREC out there who are helping us to maintain quality in our training programs.
Thanks, Michaud. Great, that was wonderful. Got to hear some high-level IREC stuff, and then I really love the nuance of the stories, Micah. That's wonderful. We have a solid 30 minutes or so for Q&A and discussion. So we have someone with a mic over there, and we'll run it around the room.
Mike, I'm really impressed with what you've done with your life, and I'm honored that you have been the guest of our house.
Thanks. Thank you for having me.
So the question I have is, how much have you tried to work with Habitat for Humanity?
Oh, yeah. It's funny you asked that. Actually, we are about to embark, I think, on our first 5 Habitat for Humanity solar installations. Great organization, and I actually volunteered with them for many years. You know, I don't know how, but they recently changed the way they're doing houses. They weren't, in Philadelphia, they weren't putting solar on the houses they were building, but they recently changed that. I'm not sure how or why, whether it was I think actually they had a funder who specifically said, I want these houses to have, renewable energy aspects to them. And that's where they started working with us on that piece. So I think that's how that came about, but Habitat is a great organization doing great work. Yeah, Solar Ready, that's it. Yep. And this is, I gotta just say one thing to bring this back around to the Solar for All stuff. In the state of Pennsylvania, a funny thing happened with the Solar for All money. So Trump came in, paused the Solar for All money. It's about $150 billion, I think, allocated to the state of Pennsylvania. And in that time, somehow the legislature, which is also very conservative, came up with the idea that they would pass a law saying that they had to authorize any Solar for All money before it would go out. So then Trump released the money, but the state legislature kept it. Yeah, so we're in this really weird state where it could be a victim of budget negotiations. It could get released through budget negotiations. It's unclear. It has to happen relatively soon. Ron probably has more details on this than I do, but this is the type of stuff that I think people should really be outraged about. I mean, this is low-income, middle-class folks who are just... there's $150 billion given to the state of Pennsylvania, and the legislature wants to... Oh, sorry. Excuse me, million. Excuse me. 150 million, not billion. Sorry, the whole thing. I'm getting B's and M's, sorry. But it's a lot of money, all right? It's a lot of money. And it's given to the state of Pennsylvania, and people aren't... Pennsylvanians just... The legislature would rather give it back than see people helped with their electric bills. It's insane. $150 million. I mean... This is crazy for training, for lowering it.
The Senate in particular has to allow for or let it pass that another
You have a
department
microphone.
within Pennsylvania will be authorized to give that money out. And it has to be spent like very soon, like I think somewhere in September, or that money has to go back.
Right.
So the New York Times just had an article today. The Trump administration is trying to cancel all the obligated funds for Solar for All this week.
Oh, God.
So.
Yeah. And this is the type of thing, obviously there's so much to be outraged about today, right? I mean, and that's part of the problem is there's so many different things. And it was weird when I went to DC to lobby for better solar policy while the BBB, whatever you want to say that stands for, was being negotiated. And, I saw people in the halls talking about Medicaid, and it's hard when you're looking at people and their health care is getting cut, and you're talking about renewable energy, but it all matters. It all matters. And we need to stand up and say, and make sure people understand that the money that the federal government had earmarked for them is not going to them.
The mentorship thing is interesting. I'm curious if you're seeing a need or like a gap in providing that mentorship to peers of yours that are solar employers, solar trainers. Have you done any of that?
Yeah, great point. So the question was, the mentorship thing that we're doing, are we talking to other companies about sort of that sort of thing, or how they work with training their folks. It's difficult to talk with companies that are trying to sort of retrofit for responsibility. You know what I mean? That's a hard part. If the company sort of was built from the ground up thinking we're gonna try to employ the right way, we're gonna do things the right way, it's an easier conversation. Because there are a lot of companies out there that really don't want to dedicate the resources necessary. So saying, oh, you should have a mentor on the roof. Well, we have 4 people in a crew. It's like, okay, well, now you need a mentor there, all right? And so sometimes that conversation doesn't go so well. But other times, people get it, and they say, okay, we can't afford that at the moment, so we're going to take the phone step first. We're going to make sure everybody has phones first, because that's a relatively low-cost thing that we can do now, and then work our way towards mentorship as we go along. So yes, we are talking with other companies. We're part of a national network. I got to give a shout out to Amicus. They're a solar cooperative. So we're over 80 independently owned solar companies throughout the United States. Exact Solar is a recent joinee of Amicus, and we all talk about how we can mentor, how we can have best practices and training. And I think that the actually one of the things we've just started using too is the career map. That's been very helpful in the classes as well, and we're going to make sure that people hear that, because we teach the vocation of solar installation, but what happens a lot of times is folks jump around. They start an installation. We have a guy, Hassan, started in installation, jumped over to operations after a couple years in installation, and is now one of our leading salespeople. Great, that was critical. So seeing that's success. Again, how do you measure it? It's a little different. He's not in the same job. He's not in installation, but that's success.
How do you recruit and introduce this career path to individuals from low socioeconomic areas or poverty-stricken areas? What are your recruiting methods?
Yeah, sure. So that's, again, where the nonprofits come in, is we partner with OIC and with Power Corps. But we actually help them. So they have recruiting paths in the community, but we provide them with the materials. So one of the things we did that actually, and I can show you an example of this, typically when you're recruiting for solar or something, there's a picture of a solar panel, maybe somebody's house, but it's like a suburban house with solar. Because we're in the city of Philadelphia, we have between 40 and 45% of our workforce is black. It's a black city. I'm not trying to, make any statement here. It's pretty easy for us to be a diverse company. But what we decided to do was make something that looked like almost like a movie poster with our installers in front of their work. And that was our recruiting tool. Rather than showing suburban houses with solar on them, it's, the black guy who's the leader of our crew, in front of his thing, like, that's my work. I did that. You know what I mean? And it's 4 people, and it looks like a movie poster. And it says solar installation and education. And that's the grab. And so having the nonprofits who are deeply intertwined with the community, but then getting them the materials that's going to get people. All of our classes are oversubscribed. Every single one of them. It's been pretty incredible. So
Let's go here. Yeah.
Well, first of all, I had a quick follow-up on what you were just saying before my question for Cynthia on this notion of workforce development and kind of comparing notes with other types of companies. There's probably other types of sustainability businesses that aren't solar that are doing similar things. And I want to talk to you later about Bennett Compost in Philadelphia.
Oh yeah, Bennett's great.
Yeah, you're a client of his apparently. Tim just told me.
Yeah.
They do a very similar mentorship, workforce development thing in Philadelphia in the composting field. But because for Cynthia, my question is, we've talked a lot about this aspect of workforce development that we were just talking about. I work at a university. and a four-year university, and I'm curious what your thoughts are, or anyone in some room, about what the needs are for, with the role of four-year institutions, master's programs, et cetera, in workforce development for what the solar industry needs now.
Yeah, employers. Employers need to be part of the conversation with you all, and they're typically not. And I've been to several conferences over the past 3.5 years and talked to folks in higher ed for a variety of different roles, from policy to engineers, like high-level jobs in clean energy. And the curriculum, in fact, we did a report for DOE, and I talked to some professors at pretty prestigious universities and said, how old is your curriculum? They're like, well, it's pretty old. I'm like, well, do you talk to the employers today? He's like, no, we don't do that. And I come from higher ed, so I feel comfortable saying this. We're in our own little bubble in higher ed, and we create our curriculum in a little bubble, and we do and we think we're wonderful. I came from a community college. We thought we were great. We were great. But when they get out into the workforce, there's a disconnect. And I've had plenty of solar installers tell me that they've got guys who come through whatever credential or certification. They said, we have to start all over. Great, you have your credential. It's not even what we need. And so bringing those employers into those conversations, I think at the four-year institutions, when you're developing curriculum, when you're just talking about what courses they need to take to be prepared to go out. And then we talk a lot about those connections for folks coming out of K-12 or community colleges and job fairs. But when you leave a four-year institution, it's like the university is like, good luck. We need to really do a better job. And I was talking to some folks before the bottom fell out in 2025, some four-year universities that wanted to come together and create clean energy coalitions to really have job fairs at that higher level so that students were aware that this is what I can go into. I can go into utilities. I can go here, and work at Google or wherever it might be. But we really need to have those employers in at the forefront. And then looking backwards, what are those pathways? Maybe we can get credit for prior learning for folks that are coming out of the community college. So that four-year degree isn't such a slug. We're talking about underrepresented communities, the elephant in his room, and what I wrote down here for one of the challenges is cost. They don't have money to go to a four-year degree. Can't we give them credit for the credentials they have, or maybe the associate's degree that they have? Can we work with the CTE programs or the community colleges to help get that credit for prior learning, so that we can expedite them into that space? I think that would be really helpful, because when you come in and you get that job and you do want to move to the next level, which the younger generation does want to do quickly, how can we help expedite and reduce the cost for them to do that? I think it would be really helpful. But even getting the city of Richmond involved. So Washington, D.C. did an infrastructure academy. And, well, they're DC, they're very tiny. But why it worked was the mayor was involved, Pepco was involved, we had everybody at the table. And we often don't have all the right voices at the table to really streamline some of this work. So that would be helpful.
Yeah, I'd love to tack on to that. In Philadelphia, they can't do energy contracts longer than 3 years or something like that. So they created a quasi-governmental organization called the Philadelphia Energy Authority. And the Energy Authority can hold long-term power purchase agreements or do job training stuff that really would take a lot of time to get through city council and stuff. And it's been a very effective model. So I have to give a shout out to the Philadelphia Energy Authority. And I would encourage folks who have municipalities to create sort of independent authorities around energy that are focused on renewables and training and that sort of thing. But more specifically to the training, I found a lot of training is sort of either or, but not both. You're either focused on the theory, very theory focused, but not so hands-on focused, or you're very hands-on focused, but not theory focused. And so we try to bridge that gap and do a little bit of both. And I think there's a lot of, I don't know, there was a lot of sort of bad thinking around the role of vocational schools when I was growing up. If you were at a vocational school, it's because like, oh, that kid was just like, dumb as a doorknob. He's going to vocational school, right? And now I'm like, those are cool. That stuff is cool. That's where you're learning some of the cool stuff. And I was trying to train a teacher in the Philadelphia School District. They were trying to get a teacher who was teaching solar, and they asked me to come in. And the guy knew theory left and right and had no construction knowledge. And it was a problem. It was a real problem because we were going to put together the training roof, and we were doing it with the students. And I was like, I go to this guy, I go, here's a hammer and nail, and he's like, yeah, all right, that shouldn't be a problem. I was like, all right, let's nail the shingles along this line. He bent every single nail, literally every single nail. And I said, hey, do you want me to show you how to hammer? And he had a lot of pride because he knew he was very well educated, but he had never been taught the craft of hitting a nail on the head. And it is a craft. It is not something you just come out and do the first time out. And he had to get over that, and get over that sort of construction training. And what we try to instill in students is that even if it's drilling a screw into something, there's a right way of doing it and a wrong way. You don't use power tools on inverters. Okay, you're going to strip the screws, and they're very hard to replace and get stuff. It's craftsmanship. What we're doing is craftsmanship. And so if you're not sort of teaching to that on the vocational side, and then also saying, okay, now here's the why, here's the theory behind what you're doing, you're not giving the student the total approach or the total sort of perspective on things. And so that's really the gap that we're trying to fill is you're going to get theory and you're going to get vocation when you're coming to our Find Your Power training sessions.
I just want to say real quick back to the original question that I also work at a four-year university, right? And we're rolling out a new program, a bachelor's program this fall in energy. And as in preparation for that, we convened an advisory group of industry, government, and nonprofit folks. We paid them a $500 honorarium, I think, but they came to multiple meetings to tell us what they needed from potential students coming out of our program, skills, knowledge, abilities, things that they need to know. And it was really helpful. So we'll see how it works out.
Very good.
Other questions? Yeah, please. The mic isn't working as a reminder, so if you have a question, please speak loudly.
Yeah, Mike, about the staff member you had that said he wasn't just a job, it was a career. Mm-hmm. To what extent do you instill in your employees that it's not just a career, you're intimately involved in solving a significant national problem?
Yeah.
So it goes beyond that. Do you address that?
Absolutely. And I think that's it's super important. And again, this goes to the theory side of what we're doing. We talk about climate change in the theory side of our trainings and stuff. I'm going to keep it 100% with you. It doesn't always land. It's not always the concern of somebody who is coming to work with us. To be honest, they have more pressing problems a lot of the time. Somebody just got locked up in their life. They can't, somebody needs urgent care. Whatever it is, it's the thing right in front of them. And so it's hard to get that long term. And that's why we've had a lot of trouble with home ownership too, because that's sort of a long-term thing to go over, and financial responsibility and all of that. But we say it. We make sure it's out there. It's getting harder to say. And I'll share this with you. We do trainings in Pennsylvania and New Jersey. One of our New Jersey partners, we were on the call 3 weeks ago. We said, hey, are we doing the next cohort? Oh yeah, they love you, but we have one problem. What is it? How can we improve? Oh, it's nothing that's wrong with the class. What's the problem? Well, we spend federal dollars on this, and we were told that anything that says the word solar, we can't spend money on. I said, okay, it's all right. The name we changed the name a few years back, and so let's use Find Your Power. That's our curriculum name anyhow. That's actually not the problem. We already did that. I said, really? I said, what's the problem? Well, when we cut the checks to you, it says Solar States. That's the name of your company. Do you have a nonprofit or somebody else who can take the money? That's literally where we're at with saying solar right now when the federal government's involved. So we've got a big problem. And it goes beyond just being able to say, climate change, and it's real, and humans are making it happen. We've got real serious problems at the federal level and at the local level, and we need to make sure that we're front and center. And I say this to everyone, solar is about jobs. If we keep the focus on that, and we say, listen, this is people's livelihoods. We are working. We're electricians. Don't take electricians' jobs away. That's where we're winning. And that's where I feel like we need to keep the focus. And yes, I will always say, and it's about environmentalism as well, but right now, the message that's winning the day is jobs, for sure.
Let's go here in the front and then you after. Yeah.
Can you hear me?
Yeah,
My question is, what sort of salaries do these people make that are in the solar installation industry? And are they unionized? Those sorts of questions.
Sure. Do you want to start with salaries?
Salaries range, which is why we have it state by state, because it is different in each state. But I've seen, depending on what you're doing. So if you're a solar installer who needs to be an electrician, and some employers require that, you're going to make a lot more, upwards of $70,000. If you're a solar installer, but you're not doing any of the electrical, meaning you're just putting the panel on the roof, we're seeing pays high 40s to 50s and 60s, depending on the state and the credentials that you have. So for us, for entry level, we want to note that you can start there, and that's why we put those videos on. You don't have to stay there, but that's a real good start for someone that doesn't have college loans, and we can get you trained relatively quickly and put you on a path. And I think the key point is the return on that investment. So you come out making 50, 60, 70,000, depending on what you're doing, with literally no debt, and you start at whatever age. We want to help employers, to your point earlier about the person who worked and moved to operations and moved up, that you can have a sustainable career here, and you're going to jump way faster in your salary range if we stay on that path and we keep working you through it, than someone who, and I have a daughter applying to college right now, and I'm cringing at the price of college. I was like, you sure you don't want to be an electrician? Or I'm pushing my son. I'm like, you know what? It's pretty cool, buddy. I'll buy you all the equipment. Because what's the return on that investment for her? For $100,000 at a university when you come out, and the younger generation, they're looking at that. At post-COVID, return on that investment became glaringly obvious, and as the millennial generation was solidly in the workforce, and they're like, wait a minute, I have all this debt, I'm not making what I was supposed to be making. It was a real conversation in academic circles. And so I think they can come out fairly strong, especially if you're talking about a high school student, making that kind of money right out of high school or your career in tech program. It's pretty huge. But we want to also highlight that growth that they can have. And on our website, before we put jobs up, we've got that wage data, because that is the first question. I wish it was, how can we save the planet? But the first question is, how much can I make? It's the one thing that they want to know. And we don't put up employers, by the way, who don't offer family sustaining wages, who don't offer that pathway. I throw this one organization under the bus. They're not solar, it's DuPont. It's all another lifetime ago. But they were famous for hiring people, and then 6 months, 9 months in, mass layoff. Because they had a project, they hired a bunch of people, mass layoff. We can't afford for that kind of stuff to happen in solar. We're already dealing with a roller coaster. So we want to make sure we've got employers who have the dedicated interest and careers in mind for their folks, and don't mind them moving to different roles. That sustainability, we hear so many people talk about recruitment, because to your point, DOL they want to count those numbers. I don't know how you count the fact that gentleman got his own house or moved to Colorado. How do you count him the same as somebody else who, got the job but didn't stick with it? But no one's really measuring that sustainability. How long did they stay? And that's where we've got the issue. So the government gets to go, yay, look at, we got, this is a return on our investment. We gave you a project, couple million, you got, however many people in, but we need them to stay. And so we need to really make sure employers have these resources to work with their communities and really create that structure that Mike has created.
And so from our perspective, we're a B certified corporation. And so what that means is we are legally obligated to pay a living wage. We cannot pay minimum wage. So in the city of Philadelphia, the living wage is somewhere around 22 and a quarter. So everybody who starts with us minimally makes that. It's a package of about 20 an hour plus healthcare plus retirement. And then we do profit share. So we share out 40% of the yearly profits with all employees as well. So to give you some idea, Trell, I would say, started with us 10 plus years ago. And I was looking, he's gonna be, once all of the healthcare, 401k, bonus, all that stuff is together, he's gonna be in six figures. And that's significant. Yeah, and healthcare is huge.
And healthcare is a game changer.
Healthcare is huge, absolutely, because and a lot of folks who are coming to us already in healthcare debt, and that's a problem. Is just being saddled from day one. Just to talk about compensation, though, one of the really interesting, and this was a real inflection point for us as a company, was our 401k plan. So we wanted to offer, we were growing to the size, just so everybody knows, we're about 60 full-time solar installers now, employees, I should say. And we were going to do the 401k thing, and this is when we were probably 35 to 40 full-time employees. And we had a consultant come in, and they said, okay, well, usually the way people do 401k is you offer 3 or 5% match, and however much they want to match, you match back up to that amount, and boom, it's all gone. Okay, I didn't know anything about retirement plans, still don't. And I said, sounds good to me, but we always have a policy, and I think this is really important if you're going to be doing a solar company, that we always talk to our employees before making decisions. Okay, so we didn't just say yes, we said, okay, we'll take this to everybody and we'll talk about it and we'll get back to you. So we had our meetings, and for most of the back office staff, that sounded great, but for the folks who were working out in the field, almost to a person, they said no, they would not participate. And I was like, guys, and I meet with them every month, this is free money. Why wouldn't you do it? I need every dollar in my check, every single week. Wow. Okay. So we had to go back to the drawing board, because what are we doing this for? If the people who need retirement savings the most, people out in the field, are not going to participate, then we're doing it wrong. And so what we came to is we're putting in 3% into the 401k, whether you match it or not, point blank across the company. You want to put in more, you can, but everyone's getting 3%. That's it. And that's what we landed on. And that way, every single person who's working at Solar States is going to have some money for retirement. All right.
Go ahead, in the back, yeah. Speak loudly, please.
Florida utility, and I hear a lot of, from an installer perspective, and even in the solar community, there's a lot of panels on the home, installation, the wires on it, with the batteries and everything. But what I face as a utility is when the installer does that work, they now remove themselves from the process. And like I think the video where, what was it? The video we just watched where the homeowner kind of gave the review for the amazing work that the company did. But which the customer mentioned the in-phase app. The in-phase app is a critical piece to public perception of solar in general. Typically, we have a customer base in Florida, more specifically, where the anxiety and the angst about solar is developed after the installation. And as far as the understanding of the app, understanding that it's not a set it and forget it technology, and the technology is about ongoing learning habits, learning consumption, learning how the impact of HVAC systems, the usage of the thermostats, the smart devices, how it all impacts the customer's quality of life. So is there any type of direction where the customer, where the installer, or maybe a career path, where they go from being an installer to also being a person that maybe doesn't energy consultation, because ultimately too, what I'm seeing on the interconnection side of it is the wiring also impacts what the customer sees on the app as well. So if the installer doesn't have a real keen knowledge of backup panels, critical loads panels, the battery, and how the correlation between the battery and how what they're seeing on the app can also affect what their production is showing, what the exporting is showing, all those things based on the CTs and all the technical aspect of it, how that can also impact what they're seeing every day, and how it's impacting their bills as well, the utility bills. So is there any like career path that kind of takes them from the installer, or maybe cross-pollinates, cross-trains them on the installation as well as the everyday behavioral impacts of the installation?
Yeah, I can give an example of where that's happening in Virginia. I'm in Virginia. There's a solar installer, and he started in energy efficiency, and we're seeing a lot of that, by the way. We're seeing a lot of folks pivot to integrating energy efficiency, HVAC into one, like they're trying to make ends meet. So something we didn't talk about today was skills matching. And that's something that I think is really important, especially as we navigate what's going to happen. We're losing potentially billions of dollars. How do we stay alive? Well, we still need electricians. We still need HVAC technicians. We still need all of these workers. And when I came over to clean energy, I said one of the great things about it is the jobs are everywhere and nowhere all at the same time. And what I mean by nowhere is they're not coded in DOL. You don't just type in solar installer and see it in government speak. And looking at career pathways, you'll see it. In some cases, it's under carpentry. Craft laborer, construction. I mean, you think construction is building a house. You don't think of it that way. So it's embedded in all these places, which is wonderful because that's going to allow us to stay flexible. But what this particular contractor found was, to your point, he's better off if he can explain to the customer all of the benefits and what's going on. And so he has a whole showroom where you see what it looks like behind the walls. He shows you the insulation. He shows you, the duct work. He's like, do you know what a leaky duct looks like? I was like, no, I have no idea. I'm like, no. And so I got to see it. And he shows you the light bulbs and the energy and what happens when you leave them on and the meter. And he takes clients and customers through. But beyond that, they partnered with a state park, and they have a house, a little mini house in the state park. And on Saturdays, they do all the fairs for the kids. The kids come in, they see all the things, and they teach the parents about, here's what your battery pack is doing. Here's why you need solar and battery storage. And they show them how everything works behind the curtain, so to speak. And he's been wildly successful. I mean, it started off as a let me get customers, and now it's more of a community service. And so he's gone around and helped other solar installers take it to that next level. Is there a career pathway for that? Energy efficiency, energy auditors, those things exist. Have they cross-pollinated with solar? Not a whole lot, not a specific career pathway, but that's what we're trying to instill in people is if you've got the skills because you've done this for so long, we only need a few more skills and look at what else you can do. And so getting employers to see that the skills that these folks bring to the table are valuable across all of these different sectors is going to be how we sustain through all of the tragedy happening right now.
Yeah. I'm gonna throw one part of that back at you, which is I think that the sort of flat rate structure and the confusing bills that people get from utilities has been a big part of the problem. If you look at your utility bill, and we do this all the time with our clients, most of the times they end up saying, I'm lost. I can't understand my bill. And that's a big problem with the way that we sell electricity, is that people are confused out of the gate. I think the second part of that is that the solar industry needs to do a better job of regulating itself. And we've had this problem we call now the solar bros. And there's no problem with promising people the sun, but some people go out and it's the sun, moon, and stars, and that's when it becomes a problem because people don't. They'll say, oh, this will work all the time, even when the grid goes out. No, it won't, not unless you have batteries, doesn't work that way. You need a transfer switch and things like that. And then the last part of it is the battery folks didn't help anything because they promised the sun, moon, and stars with batteries. And they said, guess what? You'll back up your whole home. No, you won't. No, you won't. Not with a lot of the battery technology that's out there now. Maybe in the future. The good news, though, is I think there's more alignment coming with that. And I think you've hit on something that's absolutely critical for the industry. And I'm really excited. And we're training up around energy management systems. And I think that that's really a big part of the future, is that we'll no longer be doing critical loads panels. Instead, we'll have a smart panel, electrical panel, that can tell people, hey, this load is drawing a lot. You might want to consider toning down the use of, the half-hour hairdryer session in the morning, or whatever it is. Yeah. Sorry, I didn't mean to pick on anyone. All right, you're charging the EV car a little long and during the day. But in time of use rates, I think, whether they come in or not, I think that actually helps to affect consumer behavior. And so, if electricity costs more at a certain time, we need to have that pricing signal out there so that we can adjust our behavior and we can train everyone. Hey, when you're charging your electric vehicle, do it overnight, not from 2 to 6 when everybody's turning on their air conditioning. And what can we do to manage loads? And I'm really excited to see technologies from Eaton. They have these smart breakers where you can see exactly what each breaker is pulling. Span makes a smart panel that will allow you to do what's called a virtual critical loads panel, so that you don't actually have to take anything out, but if the power goes out, it can isolate you from the grid, and it automatically turns off a certain subset of loads so that you keep your critical loads and everything else gets shed automatically. And I think those are the types of things that consumers really need in order to fully understand what they're getting. But there's the problem of the solar bros who are just out there selling. And it's a major problem in the industry that people, after they buy solar, feel really ripped off, both from a capability standpoint, because they were told it was more capable than it actually was, but also, and this is really bad, from a price standpoint. They just get absolutely fleeced on leases and different financing pieces that are out there. So we need to have major oversight in the industry. We're for that.
Thanks, folks. I'm going to have to pause it here. It's 2:14, so I'd encourage folks, if you have other questions, come up and ask the panelists. I want to give them each 30 seconds or less if you can. Let's start with you, Cynthia. Final thoughts, one key takeaway. What do you want folks in the audience to know before we take off?
There is so much hope, and between last night and tonight, the knowledge in these rooms and what we are going to hear over the next couple of days, I know that we're hearing and reading a lot of disastrous things. We have a fantastic infrastructure here, and there's a huge community who's passionate about this. So reach out to your partners, reach out to IREC, visit our website, however we can put you in touch with people to really strengthen what you're doing. There's still funding left. It's just in different places. I didn't get to talk about it, but there is funding in WIOA. There's funding at your Department of Social Services. There's workforce money still out there, and those places don't care if it goes to clean energy. They're measured by how many people get jobs. So their whole goal is to get people employed. We need to leverage and be creative about where we find these other resources, because there's still money there. We just have to do it differently, but I think we can all do it together. So reach out to each other, call me, because I think we're going to make it happen.
Yeah. Micah, last word.
Yeah, I mean, 100%. This is our base here, right? And we can't build a great thing without a very strong base. But we also need to be very open to widening who we are and allowing who we are. We are a diverse company. We're very proud of that in the city of Philadelphia. But one of the ways that we weren't as diverse as we thought was political ideology. And we made a point of bringing more folks in who are very conservative, because that's the way we get to have them hear our conversations. That's the way that they hear how it actually does hurt solar installers when things like the BBB get passed, and their coworkers, and the immigrants that they work with, and the folks who are feeling threatened in their communities, that we understand, hey, we're all in this together, not separately. So if I can leave you with one thing, try to widen your base. Try to get as many people in who are willing to listen to you. They might not agree, probably won't, right? But it takes time. It takes time. Start building those bridges so that we can have as big an array of people for the next election as possible, because there will be the next election and we will win.
Thanks, everyone. Enjoy the rest of the conference.